This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. This is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to the podcast. What's up, Tom?
How's it going today, Pete?
Today, I'm looking forward to your amazing singing talents. That's what I'm looking forward to today.
Well, we can't actually sing anything because if we do,
We might copyright laws.
copyright laws are going to prevent us from really singing anything today. But
Although I don't know, can we? I think we could sing it. We just can't play the actual song.
the actual music and stuff, yeah, probably.
Right?
Well,
I thought.
I'm
Maybe.
not exactly a singer.
Yeah, no, neither am I. So today we are discussing, or just talking, really, about Billy Joel's most famous song, which he doesn't necessarily really like that much.
Well, I can't really say Billy Joel's most famous song. It's probably a history teacher's favorite Billy Joel song. Let's put it that way.
I like that better. That's what it is. You're right. Let's go with that. We didn't start the fire, right? 40 years of history in under 5 minutes.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to run through this song, put it in historical context, give you some background about it.
On the individual, the people, the events that Joel is singing about, talking about in this song.
How many events did you say you counted?
There are 118 events listed in this song that he goes through.
That's nuts.
So for
those of you that we assume obviously that everyone's heard the song, right? So we don't have to sing it.
Well, I'm sure
However,
even if they don't, once they start hearing the melody, people are aware of the song. There's been so many parodies out there of the song. I mean, it's out there.
And as you mentioned before, I think that every teacher that has ever taught United States history 2, which is more of the modern time frame, has some way, shape, or form incorporated the song into their lesson plans. I mean, I know I have
incorporated, made the students write an extra verse, or even just talked about it certain times. I know a lot of sometimes when we covered a topic that was in the song, I'm like, the Billy Joe song, when they mention this, well, this is that guy here talking about, this is that individual, this is that event. And some of the kids are like, oh yeah, and some of the kids are like, I don't know what you're talking about. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Some of the kids are like, who's Billy Joel?
Yeah,
Get out of my room.
keep on texting.
All right, so let's, as you mentioned, Tom, let's kind of start off a background of the song, and then we'll try to run through this song. Obviously, this is not the longest podcast in the world, but hopefully we could provide some historical context to these events.
A little bit of background.
Yeah. You want to get us started, Tom? What do you got?
Billy Joel, he says in several documentaries that he got the idea shortly after he turned 40. He was in a recording studio with a friend of his, Sean Lennon, who's actually 21 years old at the time. And
John Lennon's son.
Was actually saying, it's a terrible time to be 21. And then Joe's like, yeah, well, I remember being 21 too. It was, we had things like Vietnam, drug problems, civil rights and stuff like that. And then and Lennon says, yeah, but it's different for you. You were a kid in the 50s. It's different. He actually said to him, nothing happened in the 50s. And then Joel, who actually at one point wanted to be a history teacher. I
saw that as well. He wanted to be a history teacher.
Like, you didn't hear about things. He actually says in the interview, he said, you didn't hear things about like the Korean War or the Suez Canal. And then right there, he's like, this would make a pretty interesting song. So he kind of formed the basic framework for the song. So he got into it. He writes a song. Surprisingly, years later, the song comes out in 1989. It's a huge hit. It's on the release of his album Stormfront, and it winds up becoming number 1 song for that year. But Billy Joel actually doesn't like the song very much. He compares it to some of his other songs, like the longest time, which he says is like. The melody just sounds so much better. He compares.
He said musically. He said this song is terrible. Like he's quoted as saying that.
Yeah, he says it's a terrible song. He says whenever he hears the melody for "We Didn't Start the Fire," to him it feels like a dentist drill. So he really didn't like it. And then people kind of asked him, "Well, did you try to chronicle the Cold War in the song?" He's like, "No, I just happened to be like when the song came out in '89, like the Soviet Union basically closed down."
Yeah, it collapsed.
Yeah, which is future podcast. There we go. Get that out of the way. Yeah. But it's just basically the 40 years that he lived through. And anyone can really do this. Kind of look at your lifespan, look when you were born, and you kind of just look up all the events that took place since you were born. And you're going to have these events similar to this in there. It says, putting it to a melody and making it rhyme, making it sound with the flow and everything like that. But he puts it all together. A music video comes out, which is a pretty famous music video at the time too, where it's basically just Joel kind of in a kitchen, and the family keeps on coming in and out as they go through the decades.
Yep.
And the whole time it's like a fire in the background going through, and basically Billy Joel captures all the major events, the personalities that was in this half century, but pretty much in 3 minutes. And it's basically an information overload, is what I like to call it.
He said, again, he's also quoted as saying, it's like a mosquito buzzing around your head. That's kind of how he compared it. And he also, so you kind of mentioned this is his life, like the events that happen in his life. So he starts with the year he was born, and then he runs up to 89, basically, when he recorded the song. So it chronicles his life year by year by year. And the song itself, chronologically speaking, actually starts in a very like timeline fashion. It is event after event, and they're all grouped per year when they occurred. So it's like he's running through the events, like you said,
and
of his life.
Each one deals with each verse deals with certain topics. So they deal with popular entertainment, foreign affairs, and sports. That's what he's really looking for there. So you have like the political aspect, you have the culture aspect, particularly in the United States, but also ones you see in other parts of the world. And then sports, the major sports stars are all intermingled in this. So it's giving a whole impression of the culture at the time. Like I said, there's 118 events that are listed in this song, which is crazy.
Right, so you want to get to some of these? Let's
all right, so let's start. So he starts off in 1948, the year he was born.
Right.
And he starts off the song with President of the United States, Harry Truman.
Wait, hold on. Is it 48 or was it 49?
Well, Truman wins the election in 1948.
Yeah, you're right.
It's 48 and 49 because he was born,
Yep. Yeah, so 48, Harry Truman.
Yep.
That's a good one. We did a podcast on that guy.
Yes, we did. Please listen.
Please listen. Go back and listen to it. Next. So Harry Truman, self-explanatory.
That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about Harry Truman is that.
Yeah, but just listen. Yep.
No. Well, Harry Truman, obviously, he was a president at the end of World War II, decided to drop the atomic bombs on Japan, has that famous picture defeating Dewey in 1949.
And Doris Day was a famous singer, essentially an actress, a movie star, singer, really known for her movies with actor Rock Hudson. She made her first movie debut in 1948 at the age of 16, which is why she makes it to this song in this particular year, which is 1948, 49.
Yeah, in the movie Romance on the High Seas.
Yep.
Was the main... It was like a major movie during that time, too, when she debuted.
She just passed away, actually. She passed away in May of 2019. She was 97.
97. Yeah, no, wow.
Red China refers to essentially...
the communist takeover in China.
Yeah, the communist takeover in China, which many people believed was kind of a setback for Harry Truman because, they said it happened during his watch, as if he had anything to do with it. But that's what it means. So China becomes communist.
Johnny Ray was basically a rock and roll singer at the time. He was actually partially deaf, right?
Yep.
He wrote a song. One of his most famous songs was called Cry, which was actually a #1 hit. And he actually cried while performing a song. And he was a top star during this time. A lot of other songs, again, a lot of the people listening to this might know some of these songs like Little White Cloud That Cried and Walking in the Rain. But it was a major rock and roll singer during this time period. So again, showing the culture, showing the entertainment side.
Yep.
South
Pacific, right? Highly popular Broadway musical, obviously. But the reason why it makes it here, it's because it's 1958, and that's when it was made into a hit movie.
Exactly. Yep.
But also, best-selling soundtrack. Actually, it's interesting. If you look at like history of best-selling albums in the 50s and like 60s, it was almost all of them were movie-related. Well, which is so weird. Yeah. A lot of musicals and a lot of obviously musicals.
You remember even like I guess years ago, we used to have like those big songs like accompanied with movies, and they would always become like big, like going out and getting
like Titanic, right? My heart will go on.
Even what's that one from Armageddon? Like Aerosmith.
Aerosmith, yep.
He's singing that. That was like a big thing, and I don't know if you see. I guess you still see it with like the Disney movies and stuff.
Dang it! What's the name of that song?
I don't know.
It'll come to me later.
Someone will.
Someone will comment on it. All right. So what was after South Pacific?
Walter Winchell, he's a newspaper journalist. He basically invented the gossip column.
Yep.
And this next person, I know you probably know them from the song Pete, but not from anywhere else. And that's Joe DiMaggio.
I know who Joe DiMaggio is. Isn't he Marilyn Monroe's husband?
For 9 months.
I'm just kidding, dude. I'm just kidding.
For 9 months, yeah.
Of course, I know who Joe DiMaggio is.
What team did he play for?
Yankees.
There you go. Good guess.
Boom. Boom.
Yes, but he was basically the baseball player of this time. Signs a record-breaking $100,000 contract at the time with the New York Yankees. Hits safely in 56 straight games, which is still a record today. He's actually in other songs. This is actually one of the second songs that he's actually in. The famous Simon Garfunkel song.
Yeah, Mrs. Robinson,
Mrs.
right?
Robinson. They said, "Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Jolton Joe has left
Yeah.
and gone away." And Joe DiMaggio was so angry at Simon Garfunkel. He thought they were making fun of him. He actually wanted to sue them for a time until his people kind of explained to him, like, no, they're basically calling you an American icon, Joe. And so just kind of calm down here.
Calm down, Joe.
He was very protective of his image.
I didn't realize that he was only married to Marilyn Monroe for 9 months.
Well, yeah,
he paid for her funeral though.
There was talks from what I saw. They were probably going to get remarried, and he said she was the love of his life. And he really protected her image. He didn't let any celebrities come to the funeral and stuff like that. He was very protective of her. Yeah.
The next, I guess we move on to the next year. Now it's 19. So the other one, what we just named was kind of like a break between 48, 49. And now the next events take place in 1950. And they start off with Joe McCarthy. He was a senator from Wisconsin, infamous senator, known to really started the Red Scare of 1950s and the, communist witch hunts. It lasted for years until ultimately I guess
he went after the army. When he went after the army,
he went after the army, and that's when it was the end of that.
That's when they were like, all right, that's it, because they kind of stood up to him, and he never gave those names that he always said he had, and
so for those who don't know, he said he had these names of very known communist infiltrators, I guess, within the United States, in
the government.
Government. If you were suspected as a communist in 1950, your career was over. Someone, even jokingly, well, I guess it wouldn't be something you joked about, but if someone literally said, you know what, you're such a communist, boom, your career's over. It was that insane in 1950. They compare it, and actually, I don't know if when you teach it, but I know a lot of teachers and myself, whenever we teach that, we compare it often to the Salem witch trials.
Salem witch trials, yeah, stuff. That's usually how.
And that's kind of how the textbook, kind of textbook makes that comparison. So Joe McCarthy, Richard Nixon. We just talked about Richard Nixon.
Yeah, we just talked about this is Nixon before all that. This is when he's first elected to the Senate.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of Nixon in the national spotlight, I guess you could say.
Yep.
Then you have Studebaker. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is around the time when the Checkers speech. Remember Nixon's Checkers speech?
Mm-hmm.
Where he was getting campaign, basically secret campaign funds that were donations that were given to him. And the story broke. This is, again, when he's just in the Senate and stuff, and then eventually vice president. So the story breaks that he's getting all these donations, and people want him to return these donations. So he goes on national television, and this becomes known as the Checkers speech because it was about his dog named Checkers. And he basically says, fine, I'll return the money that was given to me, but I also got this dog Checkers, and I will not give him back because he is a member of our family. It becomes known as the infamous Checkers speech.
Checkers speech. Yeah. Again, this is him becoming on that national spotlight. People are now knowing Richard Nixon's name. He's going to become vice president under Eisenhower. He'll lose the election to JFK, but he will later become president himself. And we all know how that's going to end.
Yeah. Studebaker.
All right. Well, this was a popular car in the 1950s. Basically,
it looked like it was going backwards.
Right? It had a torpedo front.
Yeah.
And a rear window. And the company actually goes out of business in 1966.
Yeah.
Once someone says a car looks like it's driving backwards, it's just not gonna work.
All right, television. So
television
obviously became very popular in the 40s, early 50s. Most
10-inch screens.
10-inch screens, right?
And you had to get up, guys. You had to get up to change the channel. Sorry, I'm talking over you there, people.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had to get up to change the channel. I know people are not really. That must be.
That's not a thing anymore.
Yes.
So this is crazy. When I grew up in Poland, which, that's come up numerous times on this podcast. When I was growing up in Poland, we had, again, this is late 80s, 1990, and we still only have 2 channels. And a lot of people still own black and white televisions as their primary TV. So, in America in 1990, 89, you were living a dream. I had a black and white TV. And I remember the movie that came out was Jaws, and it was finally shown on television in 89, and it was in black and white. So the first time I saw Jaws, I was under the impression that the movie was in black and white. When I came to America right after, I saw it in color because it was on channel 11, and I was like, what is this?
A totally different movie.
Oh my goodness. I've been lied to in communist Poland. Everything's black.
Shocking.
That's crazy. Oh my goodness. All right, North Korea, South Korea. I think we just got to cover that.
Speaking of communism, yeah.
Yeah, right. I know, right? I guess we kind of did this one already. North Korea attacks South Korea.
It's during this time is when the Korean War breaks out. And June 25th is the beginning of the Korean War, which stretches till 1953 is when the ceasefire, and it's technically still going on today. So that's where that mentions is.
Well, some people don't even think of this as a war, which is ridiculous. It's a war, but
well, UN
police.
A UN police action. But yes. People die. It's a war. They're fighting.
Yes. So, in the last one for 1950 is Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe, yep.
Obviously, a sex symbol. She was married to Joe DiMaggio. She's also really known to have rumored, or I guess it's a rumor, that she was with President JFK and the brother Bobby Kennedy. When I say that, sometimes like it comes up in class, and students are like, "Wait, didn't you have an affair with JFK?" And I'm like, "Yeah, and his brother." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was happening at the same time." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, that's not what I meant."
Gotta be careful.
The stuff you say sometimes in the class, and you're like, "No, take that back. It's not what I meant." Actually, because of these relationships with JFK and Bobby Kennedy, that's why they say that, as well as like a mafia boss, right?
Yeah.
They say that she died under suspicious circumstances because perhaps she knew too much. Whether that's the truth or not, again. Yeah,
it's one of the things never going to be fully out there. Yeah.
All right, 1951, Rosenbergs, right? Husband and wife,
Ethel and Julius, yes,
executed for selling secrets of the atomic weapon or atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. When this came out, first of all, no one thought that Soviet Union was going to be so quick in getting an atomic bomb after us. So it was a shock. And the second that the Soviets detonated the first bomb, people are like, there's no way they came up with this by themselves. There had to have been some form of spies in the U.S. Manhattan Project.
The Soviets had spies in the Manhattan Project.
Yep.
But Julius, and they definitely said that Julius Rosenberg probably was doing it. Ethel, they're not sure how, I was reading, they're not sure how much she necessarily knew. But they're like, well, she knew enough. She was married to the guy, so they executed her too.
Boom. Yep.
Of espionage. And that leads to the next one, H-bomb, which is a hydrogen bomb, basically developed under the guidance of Dr. Edward Teller. It's a lot more powerful than the atomic bomb. Actually, the atomic bomb is a fuse. That's what I tell my students. The atomic bomb is a fuse for a hydrogen bomb. And it was nicknamed the Super. And it was a big thing. The United States have this. Look, the Soviets have atom bombs. We have hydrogen bombs. And then just a few years later, the Russians also detonate their version of the hydrogen bomb. So both have it. And these are based on nuclear weapons that you're talking about a lot of times today, the hydrogen weapons, the hydrogen bombs. And first tested in 1952. And these things are just, these are the planet busters, basically.
It's interesting too. Like when I teach this, when they tested the H-bomb out, they actually took it out onto like a small island in the Pacific, and when they detonated, the island literally disappeared.
It's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. It's like the speck on the map had to be erased from that point forward because they blew off an island, like they blew it off the face of the earth. Yeah, crazy. These are the weapons we had in 51 and 52. Yeah. Imagine like what we have today.
Well, they kept on building them. I guess that's a future podcast, but they make like those bigger and bigger bombs. And then you're like, let's stop testing them, like the Tsar bomb, the Tsar Bomba.
Yeah, the mutual.
And they're like, we got to stop. We got to stop when the shockwave circles around the Earth. I think it did like 12 times or something like that. They're like, all right, let's stop testing these. But this is the beginning of these big time bombs. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the beginning of the arms race.
Yes.
Between Soviet Union and us. So Sugar Ray, middleweight boxing champion of the world. At the time, he was considered the best boxer ever.
Next is Kumjan. Yes, is the border village in Korea. It's the location of the truce talks between the two parties during the Korean War. So it was a separation. It was originally 30th parallel, but they decided on a boundary between the two countries that was more defensible. And the countries also exchanged prisoners of war here also during these negotiations. The war goes on another 2 years. This is where they're still having negotiations during that time at the village.
Yep. And then Brando, obviously Marlon Brando, became a top movie actor in 51, which is this year, when he received an Academy Award nomination for his role of Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire. This is where the famous Stella, comes from.
Of course, he's the Godfather years later.
Yep. I had an awesome student named Stella. I've only taught one Stella. So Stella, if you're listening to this, I only taught one Stella in my entire teaching career, and every time I saw her, like every day, I was like, Stella, and she just smiled. She took it like a champ. King and I, popular Broadway play, later turned into a movie. And then the last one for 51 was Catcher in the Rye, which is a book you highly likely had to read in high school, which is no longer as shocking today as it was, obviously, in 1951.
Yeah, things change.
Yeah, things change, you know. So 52, Eisenhower.
Eisenhower becomes his first elected president, wins by a landslide, right? 422 to 89 electoral votes.
What's also crazy is that he could have ran at any ticket. Like he was.
It was Eisenhower. He was winning. He was going to win. Yeah.
Like Democrats approached him, the Republicans approached him. They're like, "Can you run for us for president?"
For those that know, if you're unaware, Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander in World War II.
Yes, the mastermind behind D-Day.
Yes.
Vaccine. We are talking about Jonas Salk.
Polio.
Vaccine for polio, which took years to develop and test. Years, and even then, it was very controversial, and a lot of people were very afraid of taking it. I was just doing research for a column that I have in a local paper about the vaccine when it came out in my hometown in the 50s. And people were like, well, I'm not taking this. I'm not going to be a guinea pig. It's very interesting.
But polio was such a devastating disease to the world still at that time. Again, even by the time we were born, polio was pretty much eradicated. Like you didn't really hear about people getting polio, at least not in like the Western world that much.
Yep.
But it's made a comeback, I've read too, in certain parts of the world.
I have. Well, a lot of people don't vaccinate either.
They don't get vaccinations. Well, they stopped giving it out. I think our generation still got a lot of these vaccines, but as years went on, they said, well, there's no need to give these vaccines anymore. And as you stop doing that, some of these diseases are going to creep back up. Yeah.
England's got a new queen, February 6, 1952. Queen Elizabeth II ascends to the throne upon the death of her father, King George VI.
And she's still there.
How crazy is that?
She is still there. So this is probably
probably
one of the few people that we're going to talk about that is still alive at today, 2021.
Nuts.
Yep.
It's nuts. All right. Rocky Marciano, right? Heavyweight boxing champion of the world, retired, undefeated.
The only retired, undefeated world heavyweight boxing champion, yes.
Liberace, right? Was a popular pianist and entertainer, had his own TV show in the 1950s.
The sequence tuxedos, the piano.
Yeah, supposedly he's the one that told Elvis Presley to like start wearing
fancy clothes. Yeah. Santayana, goodbye.
It was George Santayana, right?
Santayana, he died in 1952. He was known for a lot of his sayings. He was basically a philosopher, and he said one of those famous quotes: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." That was his quote. That was one of his famous quotes.
That's deep.
Philosopher. Yeah.
All right, then we go to 1953. Starting off with Joseph Stalin. We keep on saying that, but this needs to be a podcast, Joseph Stalin.
He brings up Stalin here because Stalin actually dies in March of 1953. Harsh leader, Soviet Union, the death camps, the labor camps, all that stuff. Yeah, there's a ton you can do on Stalin. We can talk about with Stalin. Basically, he dies, but he has a stroke.
Yep, he has a stroke, and then
no one comes into his room for 3 days.
Because they were afraid.
They were afraid he was probably poisoned. He was probably poisoned. And that was what caused the stroke. There's a lot of that talk.
You know what they finally sent in? They sent in his cleaning lady, I think. They're like, okay, you go in. Like
they found he was alive.
In case he gets angry, he could kill you.
He was like living there for like 3 days, just like unable to move, basically. Yeah, crazy.
All right, Malenkov was a Soviet politician, Communist Party leader.
He succeeds Stalin.
Succeeds Stalin. So he kind of put Stalin and Malenkov, together in 1953. What's next? No, Nasser, right?
Nasser, yeah. You have Nasser,
president of Egypt.
He was basically the second president of Egypt. Yeah, he was considered one of the most influential Arab leaders in history at the time. Prokofiev was a Russian composer, and he dies actually the same day as Stalin. And he actually worked on a lot of the Romeo and Juliet's productions and Peter and the Wolf. Yes. Next one, Rockefeller. There we go.
All right, we can say that one.
Rockefeller.
This isn't the Rockefeller. We're talking about Nelson and Winthrop Rockefeller.
This is Winthrop Rockefeller. Yes, I got a little confused. Winthrop Rockefeller.
The grandsons of the oil type.
Basically, him and his wife were involved in a big-time, highly publicized divorce during this time, and it ended in 1954 with a record-breaking, at the time, $5.5 million settlement That's what she was able to get. You don't always see that now. That's still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but I believe Michael Jordan, I think his wife got like over 500 million in their divorce. I'll give you an idea.
All right. Roy Campanella, all-star catcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team. Didn't he? He was paralyzed, right?
His career was cut short because he got in a car accident, which he wound up making him paralyzed. Yeah, and he got started in the 50s. The Dodgers were very well. They leave the Brooklyn, but they're actually in Brooklyn at this point. So they're Brooklyn's team. It's a small little town, and they have their own baseball team, and they're competitive a lot in the 50s. And every year basically in the 50s, with exception of one or two, it's the Yankees, the Giants, or the Dodgers in the World Series. They usually win one or the other. So it was a saying in the 1950s. Why they call it the World Series when every year it's played in New York.
Oh, look at that. That's a good one. I didn't know that. Communist bloc, self-explanatory. Basically, it's a USSR, satellite countries form what is known as the Communist bloc, Warsaw Pact, essentially the communist nations that were under the control of Soviet Union. Let's jump to 1954 so we can kind of try to get through these. Roy Cohn?
Roy Cohn, he resigned as Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel and enters a private practice. He's basically McCarthy's lawyer during all that time. When McCarthy falls, he leaves. He's basically just goes in, becomes his own private practice. He abandons basically McCarthy during his time.
Yep.
Juan Perón, president Argentina at the time, he spends his last year in Argentina before getting taken over or kicked out in a coup of September 1955.
Yep. I think he returned to power in 73.
He might come back, yeah. Yeah, Perón.
He was also the one, him and his wife were the ones that were very friendly towards the Nazis. Yeah, they were very to the Nazis during World War II. A lot of Nazis escaped to Argentina under his guidance. Toscanini, Arturo, world famous conductor, considered to have been one of the greatest classical conductors of all time. Why is he here? He actually, while he's conducting in 1954, in April, on a radio broadcast on NBC Symphony at Carnegie Hall, he suffers a memory lapse during a performance. And that was the last time he conducted live in public. And he died at the age of 89 in 1957.
Then you have Darkron, which is it's like a synthetic fiber. It's very similar to polyester. And this makes its debut. You start seeing these synthetic fibers come out. Basically ushers in the textile injuries that we basically know today with all these synthetic fibers and blends.
Yep.
Dien Bien Phu falls. This is the French-Vietnamese capital. Falls to the Viet Cong forces. And it's signaling the end of the French Indochina. Basically leads to the creation of North and South Vietnam. And this is going to be the beginning of American involvement shortly after this in Vietnam, which is going to last for years.
Yep. And then Rock Around the Clock also, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. Bill Haley and the Comets. It was considered the first rock and roll hit. This is 1954. It also, as we said before, it's actually a theme music and the main song from a popular movie called Blackboard Jungle, which chronicled or kind of fed off this fear of juvenile delinquency in early 1950s. Mm-hmm. All right, 55.
55 starts off with Einstein.
I said Einstein. I just said Einstein. All right, Einstein. 1955, Einstein.
I mean, pretty self-explanatory, right? Theory of relativity, one of the smartest scientists ever, very popular figure, later years in life, and he actually dies in 1955.
That's why he's here. James Dean. James Dean was the movie star. Everyone knows James Dean. Rebel Without a Cause. I was in Indiana 2 summers ago. I was driving through Indiana, and it was one of those like 2-lane highways, and I needed gas, and like desperately. So I just made a right-hand turn and through these cornfields, and I wound up in Fairmont, Indiana. I actually wound up in James Dean's hometown because I needed gas, and so I stopped at this like little James Dean museum. And the guy's like, if you want to see his grave, it's right up the road. I was like, okay. It was such an like surreal gas stop in Indiana, but I wound up in Fairmont, Indiana, and I saw James Dean's grave. I was with my 2 sons, and I was like, guys, you want to go see James Dean's grave? And they're like, who? And I was like,
exactly.
Exactly. All right, Brooklyn's got a winning team. All right.
That was the Brooklyn Dodgers winning their first and only World Series before they moved to Los Angeles a few years later.
Yeah. Davy Crockett, we did a podcast on that. You guys should go check it out.
Yes. But he's mentioned here not because he's alive, but because the Disney TV show comes out in this time.
Yep, and the Ballad of Davy Crockett becomes the #1 song in 1955. Again, this whole like movie thing, when it comes to music.
Davy Crockett,
Peter Pan,
basically same thing. Walt Disney Animation Studios releases their animated version of the play, and it becomes super popular. And there it is. So it's Davy Crockett, Peter Pan, Elvis Presley, Disneyland. So this Elvis Presley signs with RCA Records at this time, November 21st, and basically the beginning of his career, and which will go on to earn him the reputation as the king of rock and roll. And then in July of 1955, July 17th, actually, Disneyland opens. It's Walt Disney's first theme park. So all this happens in 55.
Yep. And then we go to 56.
Yeah. Bardot, which is Bridget Bardot. She appears in the first mainstream film, and God Created Woman. She's basically established as international reputation as the French, the Sex Kitten movie star. She's very popular culturally at this time.
Budapest anti-communist riots took part in Budapest, Hungary, and the Soviets put down the revolts and arrested many Hungarians, especially students. It was like a young people's revolt against communism, one of the first. But it was also it's kind of set a precedent because it showed that the Soviets wouldn't really allow these protests, anti-communist protests. They sent tanks and
soldiers. That they would stop it by force.
Yep. And then Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. African-American Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. I've been on that bus, and I sat in that same seat.
Yeah, it's in the museum there. Yeah,
refused to give up.
This event is basically the start of the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King gets involved in that. Many others that become major figures in the civil rights movement. This all starts right here.
Yep, and by the way, the reason why he has it in 1956 is because that is when the Supreme Court ruling came out, November of 1956, that segregation on transportation was unconstitutional. So, Khrushchev, he is the leader of Soviet Union after the death of Joseph Stalin. In 1956, he advocated reform and basically criticized Stalin.
Yeah, first person to Soviet to publicly criticize what he called Stalin's cult of personality.
Yes.
So he criticizes it, says, we can't be doing that. And he actually will be the premier of the Soviet Union up until 1974. So when later on, when we were talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev is there.
Yep. He visits the United States. And what's interesting, when he was visiting the United States, his people contacted the president and asked if it would be possible for him to meet Marilyn Monroe. And they're like, okay. So they get Marilyn Monroe to this meeting, and he asks to sit next to her, and apparently he was a little touchy-feely under the table with Marilyn Monroe, and she later talked about that in some of her memoirs, and was she said he smelled really badly.
Okay.
So, yeah. Princess Grace, right?
Grace Kelly.
So Grace Kelly leaves Hollywood, very known actress. She's one of those actresses that was kind of made, you might say, by Alfred Hitchcock, and then she goes on to marry Prince of Monaco.
Prince Rainier of Monaco. Yep, of Monaco. Yep.
And then, she becomes Princess Grace.
Peyton Place, which is a best-selling novel, is published during this time, and it's mild by today's standards, but it shocked a lot of the reserved values of the 1950s at this time. And this is a lot of time when that phrase that came out, let's skip to the good parts. That's really when that phrase and that ideal really came out, was because of this book, Peyton Place.
Yep. Trouble in the Suez. Egyptian government basically takes over the Suez Canal and then nationalizes it, and then Egypt's invaded by Britain and France and Israeli forces, and the United States you don't invade anything without our approval. That's not going to happen. And
pressure on the end, and they backed off. Yeah,
it makes Britain and France it embarrasses Britain and France, and says no, that's not how that works. All right, 1957, Little Rock. 9 African American students enroll in Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock 9. It was getting so violent. People were so against this that Dwight D. Eisenhower actually orders the 101st Airborne Division, your famous Band of Brothers from World War II, into Little Rock to ensure the safety
of the students. Yeah. Pasternak, Boris Pasternak, is basically, he writes his famous novel on the Soviet Union, Dr. What was it?
Vago,
Zhivago. Yes, that's, I'm just trying
yeah.
to find it.
There's a
Zhivago.
movie.
It was made into an award-winning movie. Also, it was celebrated in Russia as a great poet, but the book was actually banned in the Soviet Union for a while.
All right, Mickey Mantle.
You want to take this? I know you're a
No,
big
I think
sports
you
guy.
should take this one.
Well,
I
again,
mean, we
it's
all know I like soccer because I'm European and you like baseball. I get it.
well, basically Mickey Mantle is it's Mickey Mantle, okay, famous outfielder of the New York Yankees, considered probably one of the best baseball players of all time. He batted both left and right-handed. He won the MVP in 1957. So it talks about it here. Basically, legend of the Yankees and a lot of their World Series and stuff from the 1950s. Next is Jack Kerouac, which was the author of the best-selling book On the Road, which talks about the Beat generation of the late 1940s, early 1950s, and became a serious alcoholic later on in his life. But defining work of that Beat generation.
There's not many books in my life where I started reading and did not finish. There's only a handful. I started this book and I didn't finish it, and I think because I was in high school and I just kind of wasn't understanding it. And I kind of picked it up on my own. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to read this for fun. And I never finished it. It's still on my bookshelf and it probably still has a bookmark where I stopped reading it like 20 years ago.
Pick it up. It's like a time capsule then.
That's it. Let's do it. All right. Sputnik. Sputnik is very known, first satellite sent into space by USSR. United States people got freaked out because they thought it was like a space station that had lasers and stuff.
Yeah, it was like a size of a microwave.
Yeah, it literally was like.
Didn't they send a dog up? They sent a dog up in Sputnik 2, I believe, right?
Nuts. Well, God knows what they sent in. I mean, it was the Soviets. Everything was top secret.
No, I know they sent a dog up, the Laka, the dog. All right, anyway, is Chao In-la, and it was basically the premier of People's Republic of China. Survives an assassination attempt and other things on the charter airliner of the Kashmir Princess.
Yeah.
And you have Bridge on the River Kwai, which is an adaptation of 1954 novel. It actually received 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Basically, it's about a group of World War II Japanese Americans, but they're prisoners of the Japanese during World War II, and they are forced to build and they blow up the bridge to hurt the Japanese.
I just saw that movie for the first time, like probably 3 months ago, and I loved it. And
It's
I
a good
think
movie.
I actually, I don't think I would have appreciated it if I saw it when I was younger, because I probably would have been like, it's 3 hours. But it was awesome. I really appreciate it. 1958, Lebanon.
You're still in the 50s, man.
I know, it's nuts, man. We're gonna get
Lebanon. 118. 118, yes.
Yeah, U.S. President Eisenhower ordered U.S. Marines into Lebanon to request a Lebanese president to help stop riots that were occurring in the country.
Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle. Go ahead.
Returns to power as the leader of France. All right, California baseball. I'll leave this one to you.
This is basically when the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants move and become, so the Brooklyn Dodgers become the LA Dodgers and the New York Giants become the San Francisco Giants. They move to the West Coast. This is the beginning of baseball moving to the West Coast. California baseball is they were the first teams west of Kansas City, basically, and they are when California got their baseball teams.
Yeah.
Starkweather homicide. Charles Starkweather's murder spree. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, just him and his girlfriend, right? Okay. Then they went on to like a killing spree of 11 to 15 people.
11 people, yeah, in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah, in like a month.
A massive manhunt. This was like one of these first, like it's like the Bonnie and Clyde of their era, basically.
Yep. Okay.
That captures the attention of Americans. Children of the Minodine, which is basically, this was a drug that was given to a lot of pregnant women during this time. And what they figured out after the fact was that it was actually
that's when children were like born with massive defects, right? Like limbs were missing.
They were missing arms. Most of them it would stunt the growth of the child, and they were actually usually missing arms. The drug was quickly taken off the market when they realized this, but that wasn't until 1962. And of the 10,000 children born with the birth defects, only 5,000 lived beyond childhood. Like years after the research, it was to prevent nausea in chemotherapy patients. So they actually still use it today. They just make sure that pregnant women don't take it. They just weren't aware of this. Yeah. They weren't. It's before they really tested the side effects on different series. Like, oh, we just know it does this. Yeah, but it has side effects on pregnant women, but they didn't know that at the time.
All right, 59.
Buddy Holly.
Yeah, that's, I mean, obviously very known singer. and the leader of the Crickets rock group, he dies along with Big Bopper and Richie Valens in a plane crash, which is what the American Pie song refers to.
The day the music died.
Yeah. Ben-Hur, super long movie, by the way, with Charleston Heston. It was set around the time of Christ. Won, I think it was the leader of Academy Awards for the most Academy Awards until Titanic got rid of it.
Yeah, it wins 11 Academy Awards.
Yep. Starting in 1948, a number of monkeys have been sent into space in various rockets. Unfortunately, all of them died in their flights. It wasn't until 1959, right, that Abel, the monkey, and Miss Baker, a squirrel monkey, became the first monkeys to successfully.
First ones actually came back alive. Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, it was fruit flies, dogs, monkeys, and eventually humans. Mafia leaders. Essentially, there was a big meeting with mafia leaders that met in upstate New York during this year to get organized a little better.
Basically, when it comes out, it confirms that the mafia is real, like the existence of a nationwide conspiracy. Yeah, hula hoop sales are like the big toy this time, over 100 million in sales. Fidel Castro comes to power in 1959 after the revolution in Cuba. Visits the United States a year later.
Edsel is a no-go. Ford Motor Company. Edsel is his son, and he made a car that was Ford made a car named after Edsel, and it was known as Edsel Ford, and it was supposed to be like the car that was going to reinvigorate Ford, and it just did not go well.
It's supposed to be what they say, but it was supposed to be between a Ford and Mercury, basically.
Yeah. We made it to 1960, man. 1960. This is going to be a long episode.
This is going to be a short podcast. We got to maybe split this part 1, part 2. But anyway,
seriously, at this
point, let's start really just naming these things off now.
Okay. No, we got this. We're just going to keep on going. Just going to keep on going, and
we're going to do 29 years. Okay. All right. U2. U2 is basically in reference not to the band, but the American U.S. U-2 spy plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers that was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960, and it caused the U-2 crisis of 1960. We have to admit we were spying on the Soviet Union.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't want them to know that we were, but we were because they shot down our spy plane.
Syngman Rhee was rescued by the CIA after being forced to resign as a leader of South Korea for allegedly fixing an election and embezzling more than $20 million. Payola, these were the illegal payments for broadcasting of songs. Was very publicized due to Dick Clark's testimony before Congress, talking about outrage. Basically, music companies would pay to get their clients' songs played on the radio, which was not supposed to happen.
All right, Kennedy, self-explanatory. 1960, President JFK got elected. Chubby Checker, singer Chubby Checker came out with the song "The Twist," which basically became a sensation, and it's still. I mean, I still hear that song in weddings. Psycho refers to Alfred Hitchcock's movie Psycho. The most memorable scene is where the main character, which we at least think is the main character, is stabbed to death while taking a shower, apparently by the mother. I mean, this movie is to this day.
A scary movie of the time.
Yeah. Belgians in the Congo, country of Belgian Congo, gained independence from Belgium in 1960, and that's why it just became Congo.
And they had basically civil strife for the next few years.
Yeah, 100,000 deaths.
That's for the next 10 years. Yeah, political parties fought for power.
Boom. 1961, Hemingway. He commits suicide in 61. That's why he's in 61.
Same with depression. Eichmann is a former Nazi leader. Adolf Eichmann was arrested in Argentina and brought to justice in Israel, where he was convicted of war crimes and executed. Basically proved that the crimes of the Holocaust were not going to be forgotten, that they were still going to prosecute these people. Stranger in a Strange Land was written by Robert Hyman, is a breakthrough bestseller with themes of basically sexual freedom, liberation. It basically exploited human
raised on Mars or something. It's about a guy that he's born on the first man mission.
He was the first man mission to Mars, yeah. He was the only survivor. He was raised by Martians, which don't exist, but yeah.
Yeah. 1961, Dylan refers to Bob Dylan. Kind of started this whole folk music craze. Berlin refers to the Berlin Wall, which was erected in 61. We kind of talked about it. Which podcast did we talk about this in?
Did we mention it somewhere?
Yeah, I'm almost positive we did. All right, Bay of Pigs invasion. So this is kind of what derails President's.
It's a black guy in Kennedy.
Yeah. Essentially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to arm Cuban exiles, arm them, and secretly, it's a CIA mission, drop them back in Cuba and at the Bay of Pigs, and that was supposed to start this insurrection and an uprising, and everybody else was supposed to join these ex-Cubans in overthrowing Castro, but Castro's forces were waiting for them on the beach, and it was a slaughter.
Yeah, because we do not send in more forces, the land forces.
Which is why a lot of people said that Kennedy messed up.
Right, 1962.
Yep, Lawrence of Arabia, very long movie. And this is a movie that I did see when I was younger, and I was like, "What is happening?" And I have a feeling that I need to rewatch it, because had I seen River Kwai, Bridge over River Kwai, I probably would have felt the same way, because this movie is long, but is based on a life of T.E. Lawrence. Maybe you guys should watch it. 1962. British Beatlemania, self-explanatory. Beatles take over the world, basically, right?
This is the beginning of the Beatles. Yeah,
Yes.
They'd wind up having a bigger tour, I think, in '64, but that was like the British invasion. But this is when the British are becoming big time.
Yep. Ole Miss admits the first Black African American student, James Meredith, and actually U.S. Marshals are again called in order to integrate.
Yeah, riots. Yeah, there was a lot of riots.
Wasn't that on Forrest Gump? I think that was in Forrest Gump.
Probably one of the ones in Forrest Gump. Yeah, basically a lot of the Southern people did not want African Americans coming to their schools.
All right, John Glenn
was the first American that orbited space in Friendship 7 on February 20th. He actually becomes the oldest man ever in space later on. Also becomes a senator.
Really? Good to know.
Liston beats Patterson. Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson fought for the World Heavyweight Championship September 25th, ending in a first-round knockout. And it was the first time Patterson had ever knocked out anyone, and only 8 of his losses in his 20-year professional career.
Yeah, and he was boss and the most feared boxer until another boxer knocked him out, and that was Cassius Clay,
who after the fight changed his name to Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
All right, 1963.
Oh, we're getting there, man. And actually, you know what? It's okay, because he eventually kind of stops the whole chronological thing and starts just naming things.
Yeah, after this.
So we're good. All right, Pope Paul VI was Pope or leader of the Catholic Church from 63 to 78, which is why it's Pope Paul in 63. Malcolm X, Civil Rights Movement. He was the counter, I guess, to MLK. Right? Would you say counter? I would say counter.
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. He was a little more radical. I guess you could say a little more advocate, but he wasn't. Yes and no. He actually did. He wasn't for violence necessarily.
No, he was about the idea of Black power. Like, you should be proud of being Black. See, his idea was, I don't want to integrate with the white races, which is what MLK was talking about. He said, no, I just want an equal share of the same life. Like, no, I want to be Black.
His main thing he wanted like that, what he called respectability of all races.
Exactly.
Getting assassinated in 65.
Assassinated in 65, yeah. British politician sex. It's a sex scandal. Secretary of State, or rather, Secretary of State for War, right?
Yeah.
Was highly respected and married, but essentially he has an
affair with a showgirl. And then there was a bunch of questions about it before the House of Commons, and when the truth came out, led to his own resignation, a lot of other undermining the credibility, basically, of the prime minister at the time.
Yeah. And then he ends, this is interesting because he kind of ends this chronological thing of decades with JFK blown away.
What else do I have to say?
Exactly. And after that, the 64 to 89, it's no longer per decade. He kind of just they're not in the right order per se. They kind of
he's just naming events, people, political events, social events, sporting events from this point on. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, I guess we could just kind of talk about some of these, but I don't know if we need to hit up all of them.
Birth control. Yeah, birth control.
Birth control, right?
The oral contraceptives known as the pill come out during this time.
Yes. And actually, a lot of people thought, like a lot of males in Congress thought this is terrible and women should not have the right to take the pill.
If Ho Chi Minh, the Vietnamese communist who served as president of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh Trail supply line to North Vietnamese, so the Viet Cong rebels in the South. Basically a famous name in Vietnamese culture.
Yep.
Richard Nixon back again, former vice president. Richard Nixon is now elected president in 1968. And then he says, Moonshot Woodstock. Moonshot is referred to Apollo 11, the first unmanned lunar landing, successfully lands on the moon. And then Woodstock, famous rock and roll festival in 69. That basically came to be like the epicenter of the counterculture movement.
And Watergate we just talked about on our last podcast. Obviously, the biggest political scandal of United States career, not career, I guess United
United
States,
States history.
definitely, yeah, history. I would say, yeah. Punk rock hits the music scene with such groups as Sex Pistols, um, and then what's next?
You have punk rock Begin. Begin was the prime minister of Israel. Reagan.
Yeah,
See, he's kind of he's looking for things that go together now. So it's Begin,
yeah.
Reagan, Palestine. So
You're right. Like there's like no, he just kind of went with it towards the
Reagan is
end.
basically the former. There's a future president. Ronald Reagan was also a former movie star at the time. And
Because
this
even
is
when he talks about like terror on the airlines, you notice that like he's not referring to any one specific event.
well, there was
Like
just several. There were several actually in that span of 76 to 77. But you skip Palestine's in there, so it's Begin,
oh
Reagan,
my bad.
Palestine, terror on the airline. So see,
Yeah,
Begin, Reagan, Stein line. He's just trying to put things
yeah,
together here. So yeah,
man.
Palestine is the ongoing Israeli Palestinian conflict escalates during this time when Israel establishes settlements in the West Bank, which was
I'm
their
kind of getting
prerogative.
this whole. You know how he said like it feels like there's a fly buzzing around your head when he sings this song. Just trying to like speed explain this song. I
Next
kind of
time.
get it. Like this
Yeah.
is just a
Well,
lot.
it's also a catchy song though. But even like going over it, I just remember like a lot of parts I thought he said something different. you
Yeah,
know,
right. Until you're
like,
like,
I'm actually like looking at it. So you have terror on the airlines refers to a lot of aircraft
airline hijack.
hijackings, yeah, that
Yeah.
take place during this time, particularly the Palestine hijack of Air France Air France number 1939.
Ayatollahs in Iran, talking about Shah of Iran, who's supported by the United States. Russians in Afghanistan. He's talking about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, which actually was like
Yeah,
their
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Yeah, that could be a good podcast.
Oh yeah, if you ever
Um,
watch a great movie about that is Charlie Wilson's War. If you ever saw it with Tom Hanks.
Never saw it.
Great
I should
movie.
see
Great
it.
movie. All right. Anyway, 19,
Wheel of
1980s
Fortune.
now. Here we go. Wheel of Fortune. Come on, you know Wheel of Fortune. They spin a wheel, they try to guess
Is
puzzles.
Vanna
But
White? I'm pretty sure Vanna White's still on the Wheel of Fortune.
she's still on it. Yeah, so is Pat Sajak. They both started hosting in 1980. Pat Sajak in 81, Vanna White in 82.
What?
Yep.
I wasn't even alive when they started this.
So, yep, and it's still going
No.
today. Still going today. Sally Ride. We're on 83 now. Sally Ride, June 18th. She becomes the first African American woman in space by flying aboard the Challenger.
Yeah.
Heavy Metal Suicide in the 70s and 80s. Again, this is more of like he's grouping things together now, right? In the 70s and 80s, a lot of heavy rock bands became popular, like Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, and a lot of they were actually sued. Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest were actually sued for fan suicides after listening to some of their songs, like "Suicide Solution" and "Better You," "Better by You," "Better by Than Me," respectively. So they actually got sued. It's the beginning of like a lot of these. We would see it later on, like in the 90s, right? About the video games and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they're making kids violent. These are the saying these songs are making kids violent.
Yeah. Foreign debts causing increasing inflation as well as burden on American taxpayers. Talking about Reaganomics and post Reaganomics, really the end of Reaganomics.
Yeah, so it goes
Um,
foreign debts, homeless vets, about veterans coming back from the Vietnam War. A lot of
yeah.
them just having a hard time with and being basically homeless and impoverished during this time.
You're right. Like he's just trying to rhyme at this point because homeless vets and foreign debts don't necessarily. Although I guess foreign debts really kind of starts with
Right,
stagflation in the
it,
70s.
it can
Yeah,
also
maybe.
tie in there. He's looking for things that rhyme. He's looking for bullet points now, I would say
Yeah.
more.
AIDS,
This is
right?
when AIDS first comes out. Well, first becomes recognized in the 1980s on its way to becoming a global pandemic at
Yeah.
the time, the 80s. Crack cocaine surges in the mid to late 1980s.
Yeah.
If you actually listen to this part of the song, he's much more in the beginning of the song. He's very calm. It's very like everything's very like nice and like it's a calmer song. As he's getting later on to like the 1980s, this sort of stuff, it's much more intense when you hear it. Sally Ride, heavy metal, suicide, foreign deaths, home vets, AIDS, crack, and goes on. It's much more intense. It speeds up. Then you have Bernie Gotts, which was basically a December 22nd, he shot four young black men who he said was trying to mug him in New York City subway. He was charged with attempted murder, but was later acquitted on charges. Though he was convicted of carrying an unlicensed gun, still shows the race relations in
Yeah. The guy
the
only
country.
got 8 months in prison for shooting four young men.
Yeah, who are unarmed. He just
Yep.
basically said, "I need to shoot him in self-defense." This is in New York City, 1984.
And the issue was he also, once the one was on the ground, he then shot him again and severed his spine or something
Yeah,
like that.
paralyzing him. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. And he turned
Insane.
himself in. He went and turned himself in, and a lot of New Yorkers say, "Oh, he's a hero." So it brought a lot of attention to that whole debate.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Hypodermics on the shore.
Hypodermic needles, basically. Yeah. Medical waste was washing up, particularly like Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, after being illegally dumped at sea. This kind of like before this event, it was kind of that a lot of these companies would dump their waste into the ocean. The idea was out of sight, out of mind. They realized, no, it's actually going to wash up on shore. Imagine that being on a beach and like hypodermic needles are like washing up on shore. So one of the turning points. So basically about environmentalism really started at this point. Saying this, we have to find another way to dispose of these things. Then you have 1989, China under martial law. May 20th, China declares martial law, resulting in the use of military force. The famous Tiananmen Square protest. We have rock and roller, cola wars. Soft drinks, Coke and Pepsi each run marketing campaigns using rock and roll and popular theme songs.
Got me though. Coke, but Coke hires Paula Abdul, right? And then Pepsi hires Michael Jackson. I love how they think Paula Abdul is going to equal Michael Jackson.
Well, then Michael Jackson sets his hair on fire.
Well, yeah,
commercial. The Cola Wars basically had that Pepsi, right? The Pepsi challenge, which ushered in new. Could we do a podcast just on the soda wars, man?
Yeah, we should do that.
Soda wars. But anyway, that's We Didn't Start the Fire.
We probably said it at least 4 times during this podcast that we should do a podcast on that, and I'm pretty sure none of us wrote it down because I didn't, and I know you didn't.
We're history teachers. We remember stuff, so it's okay.
Yeah, right.
We remember stuff. So that's We Didn't Start the Fire. It's this based bunch of bullet points, and there's been so many parodies of these. I remember one that came out pretty recently in 2019 with Jimmy Fallon. He got all the cast members of the Avengers for Avengers Endgame to come together, and he did like a parody of it where We Didn't Start the Fire and everything. It was really cool. The recent one I read that there was one from a YouTuber that did it was called the 2020 song. It was basically a year in review of all the craziness from 2020 with that tune, We Didn't Start the Fire.
Oh, wow.
About the pandemic and everything. So again, it's just a overload. I really like the description. It's an overload of information.
I think I might put that in our description because, that's basically what this was. We've done some lists before, but I think this was
it's 118 events.
I guess since we did this in under an hour, we should be proud of ourselves.
Yes, less than a minute for each one.
That's a lot. Dang it. Well,
Billy Joel.
From
Jersey.
Yeah, my assumption is that at some point you probably heard this song in your history class.
If you haven't, go listen to it now.
If you haven't,
type it into YouTube.
Yes. Yep. If you have not, you should. And now hopefully you'll know a little bit more about it, and it won't make, it won't seem like just one long list, although that's pretty much what that was.
Yes.
So, hey, you know what? It was a good idea. It was a good idea when we sat down to do this. All right, I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to stand by it. It's still a good idea. All right, so thank you very much, guys. Now we know, right? Now we know. Yeah, let's not dissect any more songs. Well, at least not this one. Jeez. So
we did it for you. You don't have to. We did it for them. They don't have to go and.
That's right. No one has to do it. We did it.
You can just listen to it. Next time you hear Billy Joel, what does that mean? What does that mean? There you go. Listen to the podcast, and you'll know all the history to the song.
And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in again. As always, it's a pleasure, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. See you later.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.